Today I'm going to be showing you how to create some fun faux finishes using chalk paste from Redesign with Prima. The chalk paste comes in a variety of colors. That's the package, and the consistency is almost like a very thick chalk paint, almost pasty, and that's what gives it some texture, is the thickness. So this technique that I'm going to show you, you can also use paint. It's going to be a little bit flatter of a finish, but I'm going to be using chalk paste because I want some of that dimension, and I want some texture on my piece. And this can be done on walls, furniture, canvas, wood, any surface really that you want faux finish is a good candidate for this technique that I'm going to show you. This technique is actually my friend Joni teaches it in her painting group. Joni owns Vintage Tide Decor, and she does a lot of the chippy, worn finishes, like highly distressed, and they're really beautiful. You can get as crazy as you want with this process, which is great about it. You can start with one layer and be done. You can add 2, 3, 4 layers and get some layers built up, and then you really have some interesting things going on. It's really kind of how much you want, how dramatic you want the effect to be on your piece. So I am going to be showing you what my friend Joni calls the Joni schmear, and basically I think she uses a trowel, which is large, and she does it on, you can use this for a wall, or she does a lot of doors and like bigger items. You can use the trowel. I usually use this little distressing block I got at the craft store for $4 or $5. It's got a handle on it. It's basically just a flat piece of wood, which you use to smear on the paint or whatever medium. In this case, we're going to be using chalk paste. I also picked up this little wood plaque from the craft store as well. It was like $2. And it's got that flat surface, and that's really all you need to get a good smear going on. So I'm going to show you the basic technique, which the basic technique provides like a chippy kind of distressed look. And like I said, layering upon that, you can really get as chippy and worn and crazy as you want to get. As you can see, I've got some examples back here. I'll go through after I show you the basic technique. I'll go through and I'll show you the steps I did to layer to get these looks. And they're all using this technique. So I've got my plank of wood with, we're going to pretend like this. We can just pretend like this is a drawer or a drawer front for today. I went ahead and I base coated it with this chalky gray color. And I am going to be using a few different colors of chalk paste. And I'm going with grays. And then I'm going to show you how to make it a little more dramatic with some black. Or I guess it's more charcoal, but these are all chalk paste from Redesign with Prima. And oh, the consistency is so great. I am going to show you the basic technique to get the chippy look, and then I'll layer some other elements or some other colors on top of it, so you can see how it gets it gets really really worn, like layers of paint peeling off. And one other thing I should mention is, like I said, the chalk paste lends a texture because of the consistency, as opposed to paint, but paint works well too with this process. I also like to use 3D stencil fiber paste when I want a lot of texture. Sorry, you can't see that very well, but there we go. 3D stencil fiber paste, also from Redesign with Prima. I add a layer of that first if I want a lot of texture, a layer of that first, and kind of create some dips and peaks and valleys in the fiber paste, and let that dry completely, and then I can do my schmear over the top of that. And that creates some fun kind of faux masonry type looks, or brick or stone. So okay, so on our drawer front, we want it to be chippy and distressed, so to start with. So you can either pour out some of the paint or chalk paste onto a palette, or I've got a piece of cardboard here. You can pour it out and dip your block or piece of wood or trowel in the paint color. Or since chalk paste is so much thicker than paint, I'm just going to use a little spread pal, and I'm just going to go directly onto my block. So for this look, I want it to look distressed and chippy. So I picked a color kind of similar to my base coat. It's going to be my first layer, and it's going to be the more subtle layer. It's just going to kind of lay down some visual texture. So you just want to start wherever. The more random looking, the better. So I use the whole surface. You could just use part of the surface if you wanted to. If you didn't want as much chippy, you could just use part of the surface, or do it at an angle and just drag the edge through. You get a little bit more chalk paste here. And I also like to go in different directions too. Sorry, this is kind of hard upside down. I like to go in different directions just to add some interest. Another thing, if you don't want this intense of a distressed rustic chippy look, you can also take the block for just like a basic distressing. You can take the block and you can just go around the edges like this. So, you know, most people sand to distress around the edges where natural wear would occur, but you can do it with the block as well. See how I'm just hitting the edges, and that is giving me some distress. And that is a much more, that's a much more subtle distress than this side, which is super duper chippy. So you can see the differences there. So I'm going to wipe my block off, and I'm going to do my next color, which I want to go with a lighter gray. And just add to that. And you don't have to press hard. I mean, you just kind of lightly, like, you just want to lightly drag. You're basically dragging the paint over the surface so that it, you know, hits in spots. There's no need to press hard or put a lot of effort into pressing it into the piece. Cool. So that is how you get the chippy aged layered look. Now I could stop here if I'm content, or I could continue adding layers of color. If I'm going to keep adding layers of color, I probably want to wait until these dry and add some more. It depends on how blended together you want them. I would probably let this dry and then do maybe a couple other colors if I wanted something real funky. Because if they blend together too much, you're gonna lose the effect that you're going for. I do want to do one more color. I want to do some this charcoal color just to show you a little bit more of a dramatic look. Let's start on this side. How about that? Okay, so that's a much more high contrast layer there. So really, basically, what look you're trying to achieve will determine what colors you use. If you just want a chippy farmhouse, rustic kind of look, you want to stick with colors very close to your base coat. If you want like a more faux finish, like plaster kind of eroding look, you can pick more high contrast colors like the black. So that's the basic technique. Easy, right? So I'm gonna just show you my examples here, just to give you some ideas of the different layers that you can add to create different effects and how they look so different. This first one here is, it's got sort of a concrete plaster kind of look. It's very textured. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but it's got a lot of texture. For this one, I did the technique and first with the stencil fiber paste. So I spread it on, I spread it on, and then I kind of went over it and like made sure I had some peaks and valleys for texture, if that makes sense, with my spread pal. Just kind of, you know, do this to give it some texture. that motion with no name. So I let the fiber paste dry. You could also probably use wood putty or wood filler or Bondo or Dixie mud or anything that's thick, or gesso, anything that's thick that you can lay down some texture on. Let it dry and then start adding your chippy layers. So for this one I added a dark gray, a little bit of this teal, and then a lighter gray. And then once that was dry, I gave it a clear coat. You could use polyacrylic, any kind of semi-gloss or gloss water-based sealer. I sealed it, and then I did a glaze on it. So I painted on the glaze and then wiped it away, and see how the black glaze like sticks in those little details, and that's what really makes it, that's what really gives it that stone or concrete or natural material kind of look. And my last step, once that was dry, was to take, I took a stencil of these dots and icing paste, which is similar to the chalk paste, but it's not as chalky, and it comes in all these pretty metallic colors, so it does a very similar thing. It creates 3D for your stencils or finishes or what have you. So I ran the icing paste over the stencil, and so I got these 3D dots that create some texture and some sparkle. So that was my process there. On this one, I started out similarly. I laid down some texture, some fiber paste for texture, let that dry, and then I just did 2 colors of the schmear. So I did a dark gray and like a ivory, like an ivory kind of color over the texture paste I had actually mixed with some paint to make it like a putty kind of color. Like a stone color, and then I did the schmear in dark gray and ivory over the top. After that was dry, I took some gold foil adhesive And I did the schmear with gold foil adhesive. Once that dried, then I applied my copper foil. So, I mean, like, you can think of a million things to do with this technique that will result in something different. So that's fun. And I just think this would look cool on an entire wall or like an accent wall. So you could just use your imagination. It doesn't have to be on canvas or furniture. It could be on all kinds of things. I suggest that you get some scraps of wood and play around with the technique first before you try to go directly into your project. That way you get a feel for it, and kind of once you get a feel for it, you kind of know better how to direct where the paint or chalk paste is going. Okay, so my last example here is on a canvas. What I did was I used teal, gray, like a lighter teal, and a like kind of brick red chippy. So I did 4 layers of the chippy, and on top of that, underneath that, let me start over. I painted my canvas gold, the whole thing gold. I let that dry. Then I did 4 layers of the chippy look on top of that, and I let each one kind of dry in between so that I could keep the colors separated more. And that is probably on your more dramatic end of, you know, the spectrum as far as like colors contrasting goes, if that makes sense. So laying the gold on first seems kind of counterintuitive, but it actually, when it peeks through like that, in the end it looks like it's accenting on top. So that one turned out fun. And then I decided I wanted to add a 3D stencil. So I used my chalk paste and I did a stencil on the side. I let that dry, and I wanted to add some more texture and some sparkle. So after that, I did the same stencil. I slightly offset it. I didn't place it exactly on top. I offsetted it just a little bit so that I could still see a white outline. And then I used my icing paste to do the 3D stencil. So that's why it's sparkly. It's metallic. The icing paste is metallics. You can get crazy with it. It's so fun. And I think that once you try it, you'll realize that it's super easy. It's a great way to get maximum effect for pretty minimal effort. It's pretty painless. It's a painless process. But like always, if you have any questions, feel free to message me on my Facebook page. It's CC Restyled. To shoot me any questions you might have. I'm happy to answer them for you, and I hope that you got some good info out of this video. So thank you, and I will see you next time.